there's a shooting at a synagogue, it is very likely to be either a white supremacist or a radical Muslim. If it is a shooting of a Republican politician, it is very likely to be a trans Antifa Marxist shooter.
That is just not true. We don't know what this kid is.
We do know this kid was of the left. We do know that.
We do know what?
That this kid was of the political left. That is according to contemporaneous reporting from The Guardian as well as Tablet magazine.
Ben Shapiro just got shut down hard on live TV. He tried to blame Charlie Kirk's assassination on the left, but Bill Maher wasn't having it. And the craziest part is the report Shapiro was citing has already been retracted. This is why you don't jump to conclusions before the facts are in.
You know, it's one thing to have differences about how we should handle racial matters in this country. To take it to that level, I just think it's not helpful.
I mean, listen, when it comes to actors, Charlie is like the most sane actor there is.
Charlie Sheen?
I think so. Have you met many of the actors? Yes, he may be one of the more sane ones now. And so I'm not going to start removing prizes from people because,
right. But,
you know,
I mean, other than that, Tom Hanks, you know, impeccable record of service.
It's silly. It's silly.
And also a genius actor, and, you know.
He survived on that island all those days.
All that.
Give the guy a break, you know?
What does the panel think of CBS News announcing that its Sunday show Face the Nation will no longer edit recorded interviews with newsmakers? Okay, this is obviously coming from some pressure from Trump. Yeah. Kristi Noem was on there and complained about, you know, you edit me. I mean, I don't think this came from a good place, but as someone who's been edited...
It's a good result. Honestly, it's a good result.
I can't be too mad at it because I know that feeling of like, or even in a print interview where they just print... They don't print the question they asked you.
Right.
They just print part of your answer, and they can make you look completely different than what really went on. But I don't know if this is the answer. But
oh, well, look, I mean, Gallup this summer, in the most recent survey they do on institutional trust, I think it was television news was down to 15% among all Americans. So any step you can take towards transparency, it's not going to hurt, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Let's ask about 9/11 because that was yesterday, and a lot of people are too young to even remember, and so it's not really a big deal to them. But it was a big deal for the country. We're almost a quarter century out from there. You mentioned it during the show, like we didn't handle it right going into Iraq. I mean, that's my view. Some people maybe think we did, and maybe in the future there'll be revisionist things, and oh boy, we missed it at the time. What a great idea that was. I don't think so. But, I mean, Afghanistan is well on its way to being in the 9th century. So there's $2 trillion well spent. I mean, what lessons do we have from a quarter century away?
I mean, the number one lesson, which actually was the lesson of 9/11, which we should have learned at the time, is that we have in the West a capacity to project our own values onto other countries and other people that is just false. The reason that many people thought you could just project democracy into Afghanistan or Iraq is because they're just like us. They have the same priorities we do. You know, President Bush gave a speech where he said, every human heart seeks freedom. And so, well, does every human heart seek freedom as like the ultimate objective in the way that we see it? And the answer, of course, is no. And we should have known that from 9/11 when people flew planes into buildings and killed 3,000 people. It turns out that cultural differences make an awfully big difference. And we ought to know that going into conflict, and it ought to shape our war-fighting goals and our foreign policy more generally.
I just talked about institutional trust a minute ago. I think maybe the great lesson that we've learned or perhaps not learned is that trust really, really matters. If you think about Iraq, if you think about Afghanistan, if you think about really in the decade that follows, Hurricane Katrina, the financial collapse, we have all of these moments now that plot points, and as we go along, we see the ways in which by the time we get to the COVID-19 pandemic, that collapse of trust across the board, confidence across the board in all of these governing institutions in this country. I mean, higher education, the media, law enforcement, government, Major League Baseball, for crying out loud. I mean, Americans have reached a conclusion that no one is looking out for them and that they can't trust any of these people in charge. And I actually think that in some way we can trace a lot of that back to 9/11.
Okay, Ben, is Trump a scavenger or a lion? This is your book. Well, first, to explain basically what you're saying when you're talking about
Sure. I mean,
we're divided into scavengers and lions.
So this is not a left-right thing, and one of the things I really tried to do in the book is not use the words right or left, because I don't actually think that the division between lions and scavengers is predominantly political. I think that lions are people...
Lions are the good guys, right?
Yes. Lions are the people who want to build, and scavengers are the people who want to tear down, who see the institutions of society as things that need to be predominantly removed. They're threats to them. They are violent. Luigi Mangione is a good example of somebody who's a scavenger. And again, I don't think that it's predominantly about politics. I even think that we all inside of us have both those tendencies, right? Sometimes you get up in the morning, you're ready to tackle the day and be productive and do something good. And sometimes you're just bitching about the world and you want to tear things down. And so when I look at political figures, I try to say, are they more of one than the other? And usually it's a combination. So I see aspects that I think are lion-like in President Trump. I mean, obviously, I think that his policies on foreign policy are excellent. I think they're much more aggressive than a lot of people thought they would be in a lot of ways.
Okay, we're moving past the Tom Hanks drama and getting into the real stuff now. First off, the CBS News editing thing. I actually get where they're coming from. Nobody likes being misrepresented in an edit, so more transparency sounds good. But is this really the solution? Feels like it came from a shady place, even if the result might be okay. Now, the 9/11 conversation. This hit different. Ben's point about how we project our values onto other cultures is so true and something we still don't get. We assume everyone wants democracy and freedom exactly like we do, and history has shown that's just not the case. And then the panel talking about the collapse of trust? Dude, that's the story of America right now. You can literally trace it all back. Iraq, the financial crisis, COVID. People just don't trust anyone in charge anymore. It's kinda depressing, but they're not wrong.
He didn't quite get it how hard it would be to solve wars, though.
I mean, that's true, but the thing about President Trump, just as a politician, and this really isn't to the lion scavenger point, is that he is heterodox but responsive, is the way that I would put it. He tries things, and then, because he is not actually ideological, if they fail, he tends to untry
to say
the same
least.
thing.
Yes, he's definitely, he's definitely flexible.
He's pragmatic. I mean,
which is not always a bad thing at all.
Yeah, exactly.
The mane is very lion-like.
But I must say,
Zohar Mamdani would be an example of a scavenger, somebody who's a complete lifelong loser, he was a rapper with less successful record than I have as a rapper. That's not even a joke, that's real.
Well, all of us in our 20s try things that don't work out.
Do we become mayor after doing nothing? Literally nothing?
Obviously, his forte was not in rap. It may be in politics.
I mean, it seems like his forte is destroying the real estate market in New York, increasing crime rates, and importing the Intifada. So.
It's not my kind of candidate either. But I must say, reading your book, which is really interesting. I mean, it's not quite the page turner Charlie's is, but you know. It did put me in mind of two authors that I don't know if you would want to be compared to, Nietzsche and Ayn Rand.
So I quote both of them critically, actually, in the book, particularly Nietzsche.
Yeah, but I mean, the theory is a little Nietzschean.
Yes, I mean, in the sense that there are people who are more creative and builders, and they ought to be rewarded, and the people who tear things down ought to be not rewarded. But I think that's also baseline morality.
I mean, he also went into the fact that, his theory about Christianity is really a religion of losers.
Right.
Because, you're saying, I don't want this world. So what, I didn't do good in this world. My kingdom in the next world. The meek shall inherit the earth.
Right.
That's when God says, when I die, you'll inherit the earth.
Yeah, no, that is his obvious critique of religion, is that he basically says that biblical religion upholds the virtue of poverty and failure as opposed to upholding the strong. That's his critique. I think that's an unfair critique of religion, but I do think that, virtue, one of the things that I would hope that people who believe biblically, and I know, that's not everybody, but I hope that good people who believe biblically, which is not everybody who believes biblically, believes that virtue should lead to better results in life than non-virtue. That to me is one, as a believing Jew, that is one of the central points of the book of Deuteronomy, right? You're supposed to choose life so you and your children shall live. That doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything in Deuteronomy or Leviticus. Bill,
but that's
I'm not going to make
Bill
you.
does. So
I know, but that's always such a silly argument, because if God wrote the book, how could there be things we don't agree with? It either got to be perfect because it's written by you-know-who, or it's just not perfect
Well-
and written by people, which it was, obviously, and it's full of nonsense and wickedness and things that are everything but virtuous.
So, Bill, you and I agree on morality. I'd say like 87%.
Morality,
87.5.
but not from the Bible.
I have a question. Why?
Because it's for slavery.
No,
because
no,
it's
no, no,
okay
no, no,
with
no, no, no.
slavery.
Why do you and I agree on morality like 87.5%? I'm a religious Jew. You're an atheist. Why do we agree on those things? I'll tell you. I mean, I can give you my answer.
Yeah, please.
Because we probably grew up a few miles from each other in a Western society that has several thousand years of biblical history behind it. And so you can think that you hit that triple and you formed your own morality, but the reality is you were born morally on third base.
No, okay. We got that morality from the Enlightenment, which was an anti-religious movement. The Founding Fathers, they weren't religious people. They were deists. They weren't particularly Christy.
Thomas Jefferson used the morality of the Bible when he was ripping all the miracles out of the Bible.
Yes.
He literally wrote a version of the Bible without the miracles. I mean, that is...
We discussed this
Thomas
last time I was here, and you were talking about all of Jesus' teachings and how this was really radical new stuff, right? And how it changed
His
the world.
basic philosophy, yes.
And how without that, I mean, I think it's worth understanding that what the pivot point in history when we talk about Judeo-Christian ethics, but more specifically Christian ethics, what a turning point in history that represented for within the Roman Empire and beyond, in terms of medicine, in terms of care for the widow and the orphan. Much of what we would consider to be sort of good, moral, ethical behavior was not, in fact, a commonplace or mainstream thing several centuries ago. And so I think to Ben's point, some of that
Why do we still do it? Why do we still admire it?
Because,
I mean...
Because cut flowers die. Meaning that if the flower is the result of the root, and then you cut the flower, you can live on with a secular humanistic morality, be a moral person, be a good person, but it does not systemically maintain.
All right, here's where things get heated. First, Ben explains his whole lions versus scavengers thing. I see what he's trying to do. It's not about left versus right, but builders versus wreckers. It's an interesting way to frame things, but come on, calling Trump a lion? I mean, sure, maybe on foreign policy, but then he immediately says Trump's flexible, which we all know is just a nice way to say he has no core principles. That felt shaky. But then Bill Maher comes in swinging. Nietzsche? Ayn Rand. Oh, he's not playing around. He's basically saying, your whole philosophy is built on the same ideas as these controversial figures. And Shapiro knows it's a trap. You can see him trying to steer it back. And then, Maher goes right for the Bible. Slavery, rape as a property crime. He's not holding back.
If there's no actual outgrowth from a basis of belief that this is fundamentally demanded of you by a higher power, because you can't get from atheism to reductive morality just by pure reason, right? Even every atheist will acknowledge this. The values that you believe are not things that can just be reasoned to, because they assume things that are not in evidence, like the inherent value of humanity. I mean, we're pieces of meat wandering through space. What's the inherent value of that? These are all religious, faith-based premises. You don't have to believe in God to believe in those things, but they are logical jumps. They are leaps of faith, is what we would call that in religion. And so at least acknowledging that recognizes that we're all living in a world of faith, whether you believe in God or not.
I'm just saying the book, the wellspring from where you're getting this morality, is so deeply flawed, even if it was just the slavery thing. And it's not just that. I mean, if you rape a woman, it's a property crime. We're talking about Bronze Age people who had a whole different way of looking at things, which was not as advanced as we are. And it's like, well, you know, we have these things. It's like saying, well, jump in the pool. There's only one turd in there.
Well, it's more like saying that as a religious person, the basic idea is that God has to speak to humans of the time, and then human beings have to apply their reason. This is why the relationship between reason and faith is not just you take it on faith and you do whatever the Bible says. I mean, this is why there's a developed oral tradition in Judaism, or this is why there's a developed natural law tradition in Catholicism. I mean, the idea is that it's an admixture of human reason and those faith-based principles. But here's the real question. If the sort of reasonable morality that you espouse is universal, then why is it not even remotely universal on planet Earth? Okay, it is only found in Christian-based societies. You will not find it unless it was grafted on later by, you know, us conquering someplace.
Christian-based? You saying this with the yarmulke on?
Yes, because because Christians believe the first half of the Bible, which is
I'm
mine.
working on him, Bill. I'm working on him.
Well, as you know, I mean, this is the point where I remind all Christians first of all, I appreciate all the attempts to convert me, and yes, you get infinity heaven points if you're the one who does it, is what I have heard.
All right, final question. What does Kamala Harris, boy, she does not have a lot of luck. Like this week, her book comes out. She was trying to do the press, and then, of course, all this news buried it. The book is called 107 Days, wink, wink. That's all. It's all the time I had to win, just 107 days.
Only there were 108.
Yeah.
Would have gotten there.
And she only had $1.5 billion. I don't know how she could have cut and get a message out. But what does the panel think of Kamala Harris's admission that it was reckless to let Joe and Jill Biden decide on his re-election bid? Yes, this is the big takeaway from the book, is that she says, Joe, we kept saying, she says like a mantra, it's their personal decision. And now she's saying after the fact, well, actually it wasn't really just a personal decision. It did have some effect on the country.
Wow, this part is peak debate. Shapiro hits Maher with the "you were born on third baseline," meaning even atheists benefit from religious morals. That's a clever argument, I gotta admit. But Maher fires back hard. If God wrote the book, why is there so much nonsense in it? It's like watching two chess masters go at it. Maher's saying our morals come from the Enlightenment, not the Bible, and Shapiro's saying even the Enlightenment stood on religion's shoulders. Who's right? I don't know, but it's compelling. And then, just when you think they'll never agree, they totally agree on Kamala Harris. The whiplash is real. They're all calling her out for acting like a helpless bystander instead of the vice president. If she thought it was reckless, why didn't she do something? It's a fair point. They're roasting her, and for once, everyone on that panel is on the same page. What a way to end the segment. Let me know what you thought in the comments, and subscribe for more breakdowns.